Hello and welcome to Center Circle. This is a podcast about soccer, aka football, aka the beautiful game, and all things related to it. I'm your host, Alex McIntyre, and welcome to episode 3 of the podcast. Last week, we covered the group stage of the 2026 World Cup, the structure of the tournament, and some of the peculiarities around this year's proceedings. In today's episode, I'll be reviewing some of the things that stood out to me about the round of 32 and round of 16 games, controversies surrounding the past week of games, and some of the chaos that makes international soccer such a spectacle to watch. So let's get into it. Today's episode comes to you in 2 parts. All right, so part 1, the matches that have happened in this past week. 24 games across the round of 16 and the round of 32. I talked about some of the games that happened in this past week, particularly Brazil and Japan, and some of those other early games. But here's some of the rest of what caught my eye in these past 2 rounds of games. So let's start with the teams that have made it into the quarterfinal round. The last 8 teams here are France, Morocco, Spain, Belgium, Norway, England, Argentina, and Switzerland. So shout out to those teams. A couple of unexpected names in here, but such is the nature of the World Cup. You never quite know exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to call out some specific things that caught my eye along the way throughout all these games, and being able to watch most of them and trying to tune into as much as I could. We're going to start with France, who cruised to what ultimately became a comfortable 3-0 win over Sweden, and then got into what I can only describe as a bit of a dogfight in their 1-0 win over Paraguay. Paraguay came out trying to absolutely just drag that match into the mud, but France got out of there with their heads held high and the win, and thankfully no big injuries. Paraguay definitely didn't cover themselves in glory after their upset win versus Germany. They played what the Brits might call some very cynical football, or you could call it employing a lot of the dark arts, as it were. A lot of dirty fouls, a lot of which weren't really called by the referees for whatever reason. A lot of flopping, trying to bait the French or get them into trouble, which did end up working a couple of times. Matthias Galarza, who everyone was talking about so highly about him last week, did what I can only call an Oscar-worthy flop of pretending to get hit in the face, and earned Michael Olise a yellow for seemingly no good reason. I think that's just kind of the game plan. French manager Didier Deschamps clearly planned for this, and he even sent out 2 of his biggest defenders from the bench to protect their star forward Kylian Mbappe from any inevitable foul play after the whistle. So in my view, just a little bit embarrassing for Paraguay, honestly, because they were otherwise kind of a Cinderella team in the making, along with Cape Verde. But France survive, and they move on to face Morocco. Great transition. Morocco survived a very nasty game of their own versus the Netherlands. Again, those guys were just going at it, and the refs were just happy to let the game not flow, because a bunch of people were getting tackled and kind of injured and stuff like that. But that game went into penalties. Morocco survived that, and then they went on to beat Canada pretty handily in a 3-0 win in the round of 16. Moving on to Spain. Spain don't really look as creative as I've seen them in the past, but they control the ball really well. They have great defenders, and they only really need one chance to ice off a game with the very good finishing quality that they do have. Special shout out to center back Pau Cubarsí. Him and Lamine Yamal and Pedri and Gavi, they all came up around the same time from Barcelona's youth academy, and it really shows. Barcelona's one of those teams with the most consistent, high quality, youth programs and of youth players that make it to the first team, and that really does filter up to the Spanish national team constantly. Cubarsí is one of the big reasons that Spain and goalkeeper Unai Simon are working with a 600-plus minute 5-game shutout streak, which is a new record for the Men's World Cup. And they're bringing that into their game against Belgium. which is happening right now. But yeah, Spain, they can win 1-0 or they can win 3-0. It doesn't really matter because they just kind of find a way to get the job done. England advanced to the quarterfinals after beating Mexico and Democratic Republic of the Congo. That Mexico-England game was kind of crazy. I'll talk about it a little more later, but Jude Bellingham had maybe the best game that I've ever seen from him. He was everywhere, scored twice within 2 minutes in the first half. He made a bunch of clutch defensive stops, a lot of great passes. Really well done from him. England had to hold on for dear life towards the end. Mexico had their chances, but after the red card, England kind of bunkered down and parked the bus like a true lower tier English football team to see out the win. England hadn't really looked that convincing against DR Congo, but then actually looked like a proper team versus Mexico. So that should be something that puts the world on notice. Usually England doesn't look that cohesive in a game. A little scary. Mexico looks good for most of that game, and they can be proud of the fight they put up to get into the round of 16 and to, try to win versus England at El Azteca. Julian Quinones and Gilberto Mora should especially be pretty happy with how they played during this tournament. I think they put themselves on the map as players. Unfortunately for Mexico, they did kind of spend the last 30 minutes of that England game just kind of chucking in crosses into the box against a team that was objectively much taller than they were. So not a great way to try to win that game, but they played well during this tournament. But yeah, so to talk about the other hosts real quick, we'll talk about Canada. They got beat pretty bad by Morocco 3-0, but put up some fight. So you got to love that. I think almost any way you look at it for Canada, the 2026 World Cup was a success for the program that they have up there. They made it to the round of 16 and didn't look half bad doing it. They were able to push their men's program onto new heights on home soil, and hopefully take advantage of some of this momentum of the World Cup. And I think they should be pretty proud of what they accomplished this year compared to what their men's team has been able to do in the past. Canada men's soccer in the last maybe 4 or 5 years is really on the upswing. The only downside here is that they probably felt like they could perform a little better on the whole. And I've seen this team perform better over the past couple of years than they did in the individual games that they had during this World Cup. But that's the power of the stiff World Cup competition that you're going to face. You're facing the best teams in the world. It just kind of be like that sometimes. But shout out to Canada. They did pretty well. As for the U.S., they looked actually really strong against Bosnia, even with that unfortunate red card. We'll talk about that a little bit later. They were on the front foot of that game until then. Balogun had a nice little goal, and then they defended with a lot of grit when they went down a man. Malik Tillman, apparently incredible at free kicks. He's that dude. So they came out of Bosnia looking and feeling really good. Versus Belgium, just kind of fell apart. Like, the early mental mistakes made the job way, way, way harder than it should have been, and it didn't get any better from there. Frankly, they looked shell-shocked for almost the entirety of the Belgium game, and it played out almost exactly as embarrassingly as their previous showdown with Belgium in the friendly back in March, which was actually in Atlanta. My dad and I got to go to that, and it was rough to watch. Every single one of the U.S. players looked and played like they had just seen a ghost, and it's not great from U.S. men's national team that otherwise had a really good tournament, and there were a lot of positives to take away from the play style and the quality of the players and what they were up to. Awful mistake from Matt Freese on that third goal. I don't know why you don't just kick that ball away. I've never seen Chris Richards have this bad of a game. He's one of the defenders that led Crystal Palace to the FA Cup win a season or two ago. Tim Ream looked like Father Time suddenly came for him in the middle of the night before the game. He looked bad for whatever reason. The link-up play and the movement of the ball was just not working for the U.S. at all. And Belgium really, really, really made them pay with quality passing and sort of skipping over the press from the front and the midfield and just being absolutely ruthless in their finishing when it mattered most. And a game like this is just another reminder of how far the U.S. men's national team has to go before reaching the next level of quality that they need to compete in the international game with like the upper tier guys. Despite this being one of the most, if not the most talented starting groups in program history. Also goes to show you that, like record for record, band for band, U.S. Women's National Team, the better national team. Quick plug for the 2027 Women's World Cup that's happening next year. We all need to tune into that and support these ladies as they show us how to win at soccer. They know how to do it. All right, transitioning now to Norway. Norway looked like easily the better side versus Brazil. Brazil were kind of panicking a little bit, not really trying to get out on the front foot and create and score, which is how I think they play their best soccer. But Norway and Erling Haaland just make scoring look effortless a lot of the time. He got 2 goals. The rest of the Norwegian side looks really good. I'd say that they're the last of the true dark horse teams left in this tournament, and well deserved. They definitely deserve to be in the quarterfinal round. Argentina had a really interesting road through the round of 32 and the round of 16. That game against Cape Verde, maybe the best game of the tournament so far, an instant classic. Back and forth with the goals. Messi put some magic up in there. Cape Verde really gave them a run for their money, and honestly played really good soccer for 120 minutes. Like they weren't like bunkering like crazy. They weren't like freaking out. They were playing a really good, confident game of soccer, and they earned every minute that they played in this tournament. That's for sure. Both the goalkeepers were fantastic. Vozinha and Emi Martinez were both super solid all game, even considering the number of goals that were scored, and both made very difficult free kick saves during the game. A really stunning goal from Lopez Cabral that might be goal of the tournament. That curler from that angle to beat Emi Martinez in goal, just chef's kiss. So good. Shout out to Cape Verde. Guys had a really good tournament. I think you earned a lot of fans for your team and for the nation on the international stage, which you just love to see it. It was a good time. In the round of 16, Argentina played what might be the second instant classic of this particular World Cup against Egypt, who almost pulled off an all-time upset. But Messi and company just sort of appear to have World Cup-based plot armor, and they just kind of seem inevitable, for lack of a better word. Egypt got an early punch in and went up 1-0. Messi missed a penalty. Egypt had a goal called back for a maybe foul, in my personal opinion. It wasn't called on the field during the run of play, and then they brought it back, but Egypt went and they scored again, and then Argentina scored 3 times in 30 minutes. Messi put the team on his back. Argentina makes it through to the next round. Scored a beautiful second goal to tie up the game. But if you watch Messi on the field, there's a lot made of how he tends to walk until he needs to run, and the sort of like gravity he has on the soccer field, but also how he becomes invisible and then just sort of appears with the ball. But he's also, if you watch him, he's kind of orchestrating everything on the field and making things happen and telling people where to be. It's really fascinating to watch. His soccer brain is just next level. Shout out to Colombia. They had a really rough loss as well versus Switzerland. They quietly had a really good tournament, but ended up losing to Switzerland on penalties. Shout out to Switzerland too, by the way. They're sneaky good and have also quietly had a really good tournament. I mean, they made it to the quarterfinals, so they're no slouches, but still, like, all the talk has been about all these other teams, and then suddenly Switzerland's here. Switzerland, really good soccer team. More you know. So what's next? The quarterfinal round is already underway. France took care of Morocco and a 2-0 win with Mbappe and Dembele putting away really nice goals in the process. As I am recording this, Spain and Belgium are about at halftime. It's a 1-1 game. And Saturday's matches will be with Norway versus England and Argentina versus Switzerland. It's kind of like sad as it is that we're not like having a bunch of matches every game. I feel like the early parts of the World Cup kind of spoil us a little bit in that way. These next games are going to be good. We've got quarterfinals. We've got the semifinals coming up next week. The World Cup final is right around the corner. So lots of good soccer coming up as we sort of wrap this thing up. All right, so that is the end of part 1. Now on to part 2. Going to talk a little bit about some controversies and chaos of the 2026 World Cup. If there's been one through line of the knockout stages so far, it's been pure chaos and controversy. Here in part 2, we're going to talk about some of the crazy stuff that's been going on this past week. And I have to start with the big one. Shout out to Emmy. I've been asked specifically to talk about the Folarin-Balogun situation. So we're going to start off with that one. So set the scene. It's US versus Bosnia-Herzegovina. Balogun scored a nice goal towards the end of the first half. He's playing well. He's gotten a couple chances, been offsides a couple times, gotten fouls that weren't called in the box. He's feeling himself. Team's feeling themselves, having a good time. In the 64th minute, him and one of the Bosnian players are going for the ball. He gets shoved and kind of stumbles into another Bosnian player, steps on his ankle. I don't actually even think I can't remember if the foul was called there or if it was called for a throw-in. But what ended up happening was VAR, the video assistant referees, they're up in the booth. They've got all the different camera angles. They call for a review on the play. And what ends up happening is that Balogun is red carded for stepping on the Bosnian player's ankle. So that's where the controversy starts, because in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of the sports pundits out there right now, that wasn't the decision that should have been made, I don't think, especially considering how it looked in real time versus slow motion. I absolutely understand protecting the players. I used to play soccer. I get it. You never want to see a guy get hurt out there because of the play. And I know that endangerment is part of the consideration for red cards, regardless of intent. But given the full context of like how you see it when you like watch that playback, I don't super see how a red card is really justified. Like, there's no intent there. It doesn't really look that bad in regular motion. When they were showing what VAR was showing the head referee, the center ref, they were only really showing it in slow motion, and in that angle and at that speed, you can see the Bosnian guy's ankle like kind of twist and bend weirdly, and it doesn't look good. I get that, totally get that. I think a yellow card would definitely be justified for the endangerment portion, but it feels harsh to me. But anyhow, he gets the red card, sent off. Balogun takes it pretty well, and the US go on to win 2-0. Red cards are supposed to be an automatic 1-game suspension, maybe more if it's really bad. And the journalists are going back and forth on whether the US can appeal, or should they appeal, or what FIFA regulations will allow. There are some reports saying that they can't appeal it based on FIFA rules. There are some reports saying that they could appeal based on incorrect application of the video system referee process. Either way, a couple days go by, and the red card suspension is mysteriously suspended by FIFA for up to a year. They say that he can play in this next game that the US has versus Belgium, and the suspension of his suspension will remain in place unless he gets like a red card in another game or something. Kind of weird, but not unprecedented. They did that for Cristiano Ronaldo heading into the World Cup. And there's some graphics out there showing that it's been given to some other players as well. So yeah, mysterious suspension of a red card suspension. Then, people are speculating, why has this happened? What was the appeal process behind the scenes? Because FIFA didn't really give a reason why they did that. And then Trump comes out and claims that he called up his good friend Gianni Infantino, who gave him the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize, and he made the call and got it rescinded. Even though at one point in all of this, he did say specifically that he didn't know what a red card was and had to have it explained to him. Maybe FIFA just wanted to avoid having lawyers poking around in the appeals process. Who knows? I'm sure there'll be a documentary about this in 4 to 10 years. Who knows? What we do know is that it seems to have fired Belgium up and gotten into the heads of the US men's players, and that pretty much every other European nation's politicians are contacting FIFA to try to change disciplinary outcomes for this tournament, previous tournaments. A lot of jokes flying around, but a lot of like serious complaints coming around. And man, I mean, my take is that it was great for the US, great for the men's national team. I personally can't believe that we finally got to benefit from FIFA's corruption for once. But also, this is just bad for the sport as a whole. The ability for governments to interfere in the outcomes of international soccer, that's bad. It's bad for everybody. If you have rules, you might as well follow the rules that you set out, and then you can amend them if they don't seem to be working. But I did like some of the comments I saw that this is old news for anyone who's a SEC football fan. And so, welcome international soccer to how things usually go here in the South. I thought that was funny. But yeah, that's that. The U.S. ended up losing the game, so it didn't super matter anyways. But I'm sure that if the red card didn't get, if the suspension didn't get suspended, I'm sure there would have been other complaints about that either which way. Like I mentioned earlier, Argentina played two of the best games of the tournament so far, where you would think that, coming into this tournament, Argentina, like France, pretty heavy favorites to win. But instead, 2 games in a row, they were in a fight for their World Cup lives. Cape Verde, again, played a really good game of soccer. They weren't afraid of the moment. They really showed out well. The game against Egypt, another instant classic. Egypt will be kicking themselves for not taking a couple more of their chances, and they will, I'm sure, be upset at FIFA for the call. I think it was at the end of the game where it mirrored it was a pretty similar moment to earlier in the game where a goal for Egypt got pulled back, but Argentina's goal was allowed to stand and it wasn't reviewed. So I'm sure they'll be upset about that for a long time. Argentina feels like they have plot armor. That plot armor might just be FIFA, to quote my friend Kier, but who knows? Argentina move on. The Mexican-England game, like I mentioned earlier, was just kind of insane and chaotic from start to finish. It was a really open game. They were going end to end from kickoff, and it was just really open. Gerald Kwanzaa got a red card for a tackle that he made on a Mexican player in the second half. And we know now that he's been suspended for 2 whole games thanks to that studs up sliding tackle. You could argue, if you look back at that replay, that his foot is just sort of accidentally up in the air and he's like sliding over the ball. But you just can't go in studs up like that. That's pretty cut and dry. So you hate to see it. It was interesting that in light of the Balogun situation, you saw some British politicians try to appeal to FIFA, and then the red card for Kwanzaa got extended from a 1-game suspension to a 2-game suspension. I don't know what to make of that. That's just FIFA right now. There was a different moment in that England-Mexico game where Harry Kane kicked the underside of Brian Gutierrez's leg, and he was given a yellow, and Mexico was given a penalty, which they scored to make it a bit of a closer game there. I could go either way on that being a foul. 2 people are going for the ball. That's referee's decision. There's some argument for a similar foul to have been called against Belgium on Christian Pulisic, but I think in that Belgium game, he kind of mostly kicked to the ground, which led to him getting a microfracture in his leg and some bruising. Yeah, you really hate to see it. That it's kind of upsetting that this generation's quote unquote Captain America is just kind of made of glass and wasn't able to finish that Belgium game. That whole game was just, throw it out with the bathwater. It's just not good for the U.S. in any way you look at it. Speaking of yellow cards in the England-Mexico game, shout out to Carter for bringing this up and asking me to talk about this. I do so briefly have to mention English midfielder Jordan Henderson, who, I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't really clock that he was named to the 26-man roster until he got a yellow card from the sideline during the second half of the Mexico game. I don't know if he was like mouthing off at the referee or getting in the way or something, but see, yellow card, Jordan Henderson. What is he doing here? Since when was he on the team? And then after the game, he apparently hopped over one of the advertising boards behind, I guess, the English goal, and broke his wrist. Just like that. Like, like, what do you mean, dude? How are you getting yellow carded and hurt when you didn't even get to play in the game? Henderson's a whole mess on his own. Formerly one of the like bigger name midfielders in the English Premier League. At one point, like a vocal supporter of LGBT rights. And then he takes, at one point, takes a big fat paycheck to go to famously pride-friendly Saudi Arabia. Doesn't have a lot of substance to say about that. And then at some point quietly returns to England to play for Brentford. But yeah, that's Jordan Henderson. And now he's out for the rest of the tournament with a broken wrist. You can't write this stuff. So if you ever needed an excuse to tune into international soccer, it's because you never truly know what will happen during or before or after any given game. A couple other things I got to talk about in terms of like the chaos and controversy. I feel like there's been a lot of inconsistent refereeing, or that the calls that are and aren't being made are just not matching up with my expectations for what I usually see when watching soccer. It feels like a lot more hard fouls are being allowed. I've never seen this many players get away with so much blatant shirt pulling. Like normally that's like an immediate foul call or a yellow card. People are being knocked down and hit hard, sometimes hit in the face. No call. Not even a whistle most of the time. And then they'll just sort of call a soft foul and wonder why everyone's mad. I don't really have a good explanation other than that maybe they've been given some specific instructions for how FIFA wants them to officiate games during this tournament, maybe. I'm not really sure. What it really does feel like is, for comparison, like the NBA, where during the regular season, it feels like a lot of soft fouls get called. If you've watched a game with SGA and Oklahoma City, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it feels like a lot more easy fouls get called in the middle of the year. Flopping is a little bit more of an issue. And then you get to the playoffs and the finals, and it just looks like dudes are allowed to be way more rough with each other on the floor. I don't know, but I feel like a lot of players are going to end up going back to their club teams, nursing some injuries that we know of or that we haven't heard of yet, and teams are going to be rightfully pretty upset about it. So there's that. Last, but certainly not least, I have to mention the hydration breaks. I somehow forgot to mention this last week when talking about the peculiarities of this year's World Cup. The main reason that it's controversial, if you haven't really like followed soccer a lot before, is that soccer is meant to flow in halves instead of quarters. And these hydration breaks, 2 or 3 minutes in the middle of each half, they kind of break the game from halves into quarters, and kind of, in a lot of ways, allows for opportunities for the momentum to change or to stop momentum. It changes the way the teams are approaching each half. And for a lot of like European and Latin American and other fans around the world, it just doesn't feel like regular soccer. One of my favorite jokes that I've seen about this online is that hydration breaks turning the game into quarters was why the US men's national team started to look really good in this tournament, because that's what Americans are used to: football, basketball, etc. I thought that was funny. Having the hydration breaks is understandable because of the summer heat, especially here in the States. But not every game is being played outside. Some of these games are happening in domed stadiums. I don't know. It really comes across as a much more of a very easy and convenient excuse for FIFA to absolutely rake in some advertising money, especially on Fox, where they're just completely cutting away from the game to go to commercial. It just feels very blatant and not in the spirit of the game like that. Shout out to Telemundo, though. They've not been cutting fully away to commercials. They kind of do that like half field shot, half commercial thing that they do in hockey. I much prefer that. Also, the Telemundo broadcasts go so hard, and whether you know Spanish or not, really fun to listen to. So shout out to Telemundo. My other favorite thing about the hydration break situation is that if you listen closely, and you don't have to listen that closely either, you can hear the fans in the stadium just booing each time the hydration break happens. So that's kind of fun. All right, that is the end of today's show. That's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back with another episode after the semifinals wrap up on June 14th and 15th, the second of which will be in Atlanta. So if you're going to that, shout out to you. Hope you have a good time. If you liked what you heard so far, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a rating if you feel so inclined. Share with a friend who loves soccer or who's getting into soccer right now. It helps the show out a ton, and we can ride this ride together, and won't that be fun? If you're into the social media thing, you can find the show on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Center Circle Soccer Pod, and Blue Sky at Center Circle Sock Pod. That's SOC Pod. And if you have questions or any suggestions for things to talk about, send me a DM or an email at centercirclesoccerpod@gmail.com. Music and artwork for this podcast are by me, and that's all for today. So until next time, stay breezy, drink some water, watch some soccer, and I'll see you next time. Deuces.